Hello and welcome to Growing Up with Max. Now that we're using a new platform, YouTube, to be able to upload our videos, I would like to redo my potato video to be able to add it to my YouTube library. The reason for this is adding clips to our live videos in an easier, more user-friendly format. Today, I would like to share with you the wonderful experience of growing potatoes. Potatoes are a very major food source in many areas of the world, which makes it no wonder that so many gardeners like myself are obsessed with growing the many different varieties of potato and different styles to be able to add to our garden so we can have the bountiful harvest. As well, when you're gardening potatoes, you have different colors of potatoes, different flavors, different textures, and it opens a whole new world. A lot of people say to me, I had no idea a potato could taste this way when they've had their first garden potato, which I'm sure many of you just getting into gardening may feel the same way in the fall as myself and so many others do. When you're looking at your potatoes and you're looking at colors, once they're mature, you'll see this one, the Russian blue, has white and purple mottling. But when you cook it, it turns blue, which is absolutely awesome for the kids. They'll love that. And it'll bring some excitement to your table. And then when you go to something like the Peruvian purple potato, there are solid purple on the inside, almost black in color, but still something very different for the table and something different for flavors for yourself and your family. There are many others. Last year I did 26 varieties of potatoes, ranging in colors from candy canes to reds on the inside for flesh. Outside that were the Green Mountain, which had the kind of pinky and green blotches on the skin and the white flesh, great texture. Fingerlings like the Russian banana and the French fingerling, and many others that are all a different flavor in themselves. I grew so many to be able to find out. I grow so many each year to be able to find out which ones are better for my climate here in the foothills, which ones will survive. I was down to 19 by the end of the storage season, of which 3 of them failed in storage for my seed potatoes, and from last year I had an additional 4 of them fail in the garden from the late frost and snowstorm we had in June. But the rest of them did bounce back. Last year I had 10% of the harvest the previous year, so my production was way down low. So if you don't have a lot of potatoes your first year, growing them in your garden, try a new variety the next year. As well, the next year might be warmer and give you a better harvest. I would like to share with you the varieties of potatoes for one, but as well the different growing methods. Some of the different growing methods, you just plant your potato in the ground and see how it grows. Lots of people do that. The most common one that I find around gardeners is to plant it, and as your potato grows, hill up dirt around the stem right up until mid-July. That'll allow more roots to grow from the stem and more potatoes to form. The one that I normally would use in my garden would be in my raised bed. Have the soil at one level, plant the potato, and then as the potato grows, I mound the soil, allowing for the heat to enter. But last year I did all 3 of those plus one more. I took my potato and I just put it into a pot like this. Put in some dirt, kept the dirt moist, let it dry out between waterings, and let it bolt. I put it in my dining room where there is no direct light from any windows, and it bolted to be about 10 inches high with a little bit of foliage on top. What I did with the potato then is I just dug a deep hole in my raised bed. I planted it with the foliage on top, and the stem was already there for it to root and start growing potatoes underneath. I did this with several different types of potatoes, but I'd like to share with you the Russian banana potato. In the first one, you got a little bit more than 1.5 pounds per plant. Not very good production, and compared to other years where I was getting 3 pounds a plant, it was very low production. Like I said, overall my potato harvest was 10% of what it was in previous years because of the cold, rainy season we had. For both mounding the potatoes and planting them in my raised bed and building them up, I got closer to 2 pounds. A little bit more and a little bit less. Math is an exact science. You don't get it, but that's what I wrote down, was about 2 pounds. Then when I had it and I planted it in this way, it was between 2¼ to 2½ pounds. That doesn't sound like a lot for one potato, but when you're planting 26 varieties and 115 plants like I did, that would be 50 pounds of extra potatoes through the year. That would have been a lot of extra potatoes donated to the food bank at the end of the year from my garden. So I'm recommending that, you know what, if you're in a colder climate like me and you don't have the growing zones that everywhere else does, you watch these videos from Ontario and BC on gardening in Canada, and they've got these bountiful harvests, and you wonder why. Well, think of another growing method, and the other thing that really increases for our cold areas is a floating row cover. See, in Ontario and in BC, they don't have the cold nights like we do, especially here in the foothills of Alberta. Some areas of Alberta are blessed with warm nights when you get towards Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, but most of us are really left out in the cold. So this floating row cover keeps it that little bit warmer, and a lot of plants stop growing when it gets cold. Here in Turner Valley, our nights are going to get as low as 9 degrees Celsius, 8 degrees Celsius in July. Our plants aren't growing, they're not developing, they're not ripening. We don't get these harvests. So since moving here from Calgary, I was obsessed with finding ways to get up to the production I had when I had my garden in Calgary, and even wanting to get beyond that and get to comparable productions to the rest of Canada. So by experimenting with all the varieties and all the methods like I have, that I'm getting closer and closer all the time. Your floating row cover, you just drape over. For myself, I put a 2x4 the length of my raised bed, loosely draped poly over the top, put her on the sides, and made sure there was enough airflow that would stop dampening off or fungal diseases from developing on the lease. Watch the weather, so if there was a day in June where it got really warm, I could open one side. But it increased a lot of my crops. I got double that way. Now, come June, I always take that floating row cover off. I leave it exposed to the elements for July and August, as it is warmer weather and a time where you really don't need it. And if with a hot day, you can cause a lot of heat stress on a plant, doing the opposite and reducing your production. So you really have to watch when you're doing a poly floating row cover. One of the most common mistakes people do with growing potatoes, as well as plants in general, is overwatering. Overwatering with potatoes will increase your risk of scab. Not only that, it washes away nutrients and plugs up the roots so they're not going to absorb the nutrients they need. Before watering your garden, you should check and make sure that it's not already wet, because as you're doing that, the cold weather and the extra water puts it into shock. You can stop it from growing for a day or two. So watching that water is a big thing. As well, if your area is prone to scab, there's some very easy ways to help reduce that. You can order potato varieties that are resistant to the dreaded scab, which we have here in Alberta. As well, you can add gypsum to your soil, which is known to fight scab, or watch your pH. Lowering your pH down to a 5 or a 4.5 and then let it naturally come back up will kill the scab fungus in your soil, helping you with future harvests. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Growing Up with Max, as well as tomorrow, Tuesday, March 31st, I am doing a video on mushrooms and mushroom plugs. And I'm doing that through my YouTube page, and you could like, follow, share my YouTube page as I start adding videos so that you can be notified as I do more. And you will learn about adding the mushrooms to your garden and doubling your harvest. Harvests of mushrooms can be done in full shade, areas where you don't grow normally, because they don't need the sun. They need air, a medium, and moisture. Some mushrooms are even carnivorous, and they'll eat the little nematodes that are in your soil for their source of nitrogen rather than collecting it from the air, which is really interesting. I'll explain to you what types of mushrooms are good for this area. My first video is going to be doing mushroom logs, and my second video will be on different ones you can do in your pathways and your compost, and how they help the garden and live in symbiosis with the with everything you have for plants, and will then decompose your compost faster to be able to add it to the soil. Thank you again. I hope that you like us on YouTube and share our page and follow us so you can watch our future videos and get notified when they're put out. Thank you very much. Have a very good night.